I'm not gonna believe it.
What?
I got another one.
Seriously? Another podcast?
Yep. And this one looks like they think they're hot shit.
Have they all?
Pretty much.
What sets this guy apart?
Oh no. Are any of them any different these days?
Well, as well have a listen.
Are you serious? You're gonna listen to this guy?
Why not? We listen to the others, don't we?
If so, oh well. Who's hoping it's a good one at least?
Cheer up. Could be worse. It could be woke.
Lord help me.
Warning. You are about to start the Spirit and Flame podcast. Some of what you are about to hear may be offensive to some audiences. Entertainment is the name of the game and nothing is meant to be taken seriously. This show is meant for adults only. You've been warned. Now, without further ado, your fiery host for this show, the one and only Red.
Hey, everybody. A little bit of a different topic for today. Instead of doing some unboxings, we're going to change it up a little. We're going to play some video games. I know, crazy. Really changing up the formula. But same time, I think that it'll be good. For those of you who never did get a chance to play on the PSP, perhaps you're too young, or you just skipped over it, maybe you're too old even at the time, it was a great console. It really kind of set a different standard on portables. By today's standards, it's obviously outdated. It doesn't hold up to the modern handheld. But it really was the first Switch, if you will, when you think about it. Prior to that, you had the Game Boy, you did have the Nintendo DS. But one of the things that was always synonymous with portable games were kind of their lackluster graphics. The lower end performance, really. It wasn't that the games weren't good. In fact, there were some phenomenal games, and you could do a lot. You could do racing games, you could do platformers, you could do RPGs, you could do action titles. It's just you were somewhat limited a lot of the time in the graphics, and sometimes even the gameplay because of that. Now they would kind of mix it up. Nintendo DS came out with the entire touch panel with it and its stylus, and that really did kind of change things up. Now it might look kind of archaic given that we're so used to smartphones and just using our fingers for everything. But at the time, the stylus was kind of the way to go. A lot of people were used to Palm Pilots, and if you wanted that kind of fine-tooth control, they didn't really have the UI figured out yet. So, steps were taken along the way. Everything evolves. I personally still like the stylus, and a lot of the games you never had to use it, but in some of them it really did help, and the form factor kind of played up to the stylus, being that you typically would have the stylus in one hand, you'd use those as your sort of action buttons, and all your sort of movements and controls were typically on your left, so you could do a variety of different things. And frankly, it was typically just used a lot of the time for menus, and to speed that up with hotkeys or shortcuts. But I, for one, kind of liked it. And I still have my Nintendo DS, including the follow-up 3DS, which actually did set some real new ground with the way that they did 3D. And that still hasn't really been replicated in any mainstream device beyond that. So kudos to Nintendo for kind of changing things up. And in those cases, doing it in a fun way. I was never a big Wii fan. I'm not a big movement thing. I think when VR finally gets its legs under it, which will probably come in the next decade, and maybe I'll revisit it. But for now, it's always just not quite hit the spot for me. So the Wii was never an interesting thing. And the Wii U, I never really figured out what they were doing with that. Once they hit the Switch, though, it kind of made sense. It felt like the Switch was what the Wii U should have been. They just didn't really know it at the time. And yeah, I have no problems with the Switch. I have one. I quite like it. And as far as handheld goes, it's really come a long way. You know, you can really go back. But there was something beautiful about that PSP. It kind of just was a leapfrog move for graphics. It allowed you to have effectively a PlayStation 1 in your hands, in your pocket, wherever you wanted to go, and it was getting close to some of those early PS2 games in terms of fidelity. And frankly, I mean, some of the games are even better. Like, there were some games that really did push the envelope on that machine. Not necessarily 100% successfully. Sometimes the machine was just not quite powerful enough. And other times it was the format. That UMD disc format did limit a lot of capacity, and it did limit some of the loading speeds. So I don't blame people for modding their PSPs, because you could just get better speed sometimes if you installed it on a flash drive. And that was one of the nice things. It did have, it wasn't an amazing flash drive because it was the Sony style, but it did support flash drive memory up to, I believe it was 512 megabytes. Sorry, gigabytes. I'm not actually sure how big it is. Maybe it's less than that. It might only be 64 gigs that it can go up to, or 32. Actually, now that I think about it, it might be 32. If it can do 64, it can go higher, but if it can only do the 32, I think it might be limited to that. Anyways, it was still fast enough for its time, and I think I have a 16 gig in mind, so I mean, I'm not even really pushing the envelope. The games weren't as big back then, and I don't know. I had a lot of them on the discs, and I did play a lot of them in the traditional format, so I wasn't really inclined to download a ton of them, because it was only an issue with a few games like Birth by Sleep, and maybe Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, where the loading times were just a little bit nicer to have, especially Birth by Sleep. The menu was an absolute disaster on disc, so you pretty much needed to play the modded version if you wanted to enjoy yourself. But we're not playing Birth by Sleep, we are playing Daxter. And one of the things about Daxter that was kind of interesting was it wasn't really made by Naughty Dog, it was made by Ready at Dawn. And while it was certainly one of those games that, I guess, let's see. Can we turn the volume up a bit?
But faithful sidekick, Daxter. In my many years as a sage, and trust me, it's a big number. I've learned one.
Let's just see here. Can we do anything here with the volume? Seems kind of low. Okay, we're just gonna pause for a second. See if we can get this volume up a bit. There we go.
This is his story.
It's a shame we missed some of the introduction there, but essentially it's just Samos being Samos. Getting angry, insulting Daxter, poor Ocelot fella. But to be fair, he knows him before he was an Ocelot.
But please, don't leave now.
Forget it! Find another crazy sucker, okay?
Daxter, work is calling you. You know, one of the things I like about these somewhat older games, so this isn't really a super old game, but I guess by modern standards it's old. I think
Forget the
2000.
rat. The Baron wants That's him.
Probably 2006 or 7 maybe.
I'll save you before you know it.
No, it's gotta even be before that. Maybe 2005.
What was that? Where'd he go?
Huh, where'd who go?
That little crazy orange? Whatever he is, I'll show him.
But when you consider that this was on like a handheld device at the time, and prior to this, handheld devices had never had this kind of fidelity. Like this is almost at the level of a PS2 game.
So I moved to the right with a chop.
Obviously, the smaller screen size at the time helped, but even when it's increased to this kind of size and this fidelity and resolution, still kind of holds up, you know.
The lurkers, I then, oh.
Can you speak up, son? My ears aren't what they used to be. Tell us the one about how you can knock guards silly with a single blow.
What I can? Oh yeah. Those guards don't stand a chance against the old 1-2.
Daxter's gotta be one of the best characters ever created in video games.
I'm Osmo, proprietor and chief spray technologist for the Critter Ritter Extermination Company. Let me get right to brass tacks, young man. I need someone like you. Someone with your ingenuity.
I feel like
That's me.
Someone
without
with your strength,
Jack,
That's right.
your resourcefulness,
he's not
Yep,
quite
got it.
your
as
bravery in the face of
as
certain
good a
chaos.
character. I feel like he's definitely a
Okay,
better
move along,
supporting
old
character
man.
than he
You
is a
had me
main
at hello,
character.
But you had to push it.
In short,
Let's
would
just
you
turn
like
this
to
down a
try
bit.
working for me?
But the
I'll make it with you. Why?
Forget it, buddy. I don't
the thing I do like about him is even in this game he's wisecracking. He doesn't need someone to be wisecracking. Although, well, he does need somebody. Like in this case, he needs people to play off of and whatnot. But his general personality is mostly retained in this game, I find. What I do find, I guess, a little bit different is because you don't have Jack there. The dynamic of the character in this game is a little bit different. It's a lot more of creeping and crawling, of getting around. Definitely a heavy focus on the platformer elements, and being that it was kind of a smaller game, mostly due to size constraints of the handheld console and the UMD discs. You don't quite get the same sense of scale that you get in the original Jack trilogy. For example, Haven City here still has people going around, which we can see, but because we can't jump and ride those cars ourselves without having Jack there to do it, it's different. I will say this though, they did a good job of making the place feel bigger. You know, like in terms of actual size, like Daxter feels small. It feels like he doesn't quite have the same size, and everything feels taller and farther away. So like when you're looking at things, something like just getting to, let's see if we can get it back into view there. You guys saw, yeah. Just getting up there becomes more of a challenge with Daxter. We see that we can't just easily jump, whereas if we were Jack, we would just be able to climb up there no problem. You know? And we can't get up even onto the vehicles or even near them. So it's definitely a different sensation in terms of scale. And that's one of the things that I did like about this game actually, is that they did that. And they also stuck true to the area for the most part. And right away you know you're in Haven City. You feel like you've been here before if you've played the previous games. And it's familiar and welcoming. Even though, you know, Haven City is not exactly the most welcoming place, it feels welcoming to someone who's come back. And it's nice to see them faithfully recreate the area. Even if it's not 100%, and it's obviously different. They have different spots that you go to, and they created some, I guess, new locales. It definitely has that aesthetic, and you gotta give it to them. They captured it. Now, I never played the final Jack game with the Lost Frontier, and everyone said it was disappointing. And to be honest, when I looked, it just didn't have the feel that I got from the original Jack games. Even Jack X Racing felt like it had that character and that personality. And I even feel that this Daxter game does, to be honest. But I felt that when I looked at the Lost Frontier, something was missing. It felt drab. It felt hastily put together, and it just didn't quite feel like it had the spirit in it. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that was also what the reviews said, and that was just my impressions looking at that game. So I have to say, you know, that being my first impression, it wasn't exactly a positive one, and it wasn't one that drew me into it. Whereas with Daxter, right away I was interested in playing more of Daxter. I always liked him in the game. I wanted to hear more of what he had to do. And the fact that this was kind of like a prequel run up to Jack 2, I liked that it was technically canon, in the sense that whatever was going to happen here wasn't going to deviate from the story. It wasn't going to explode or go into any weird offshoots, kind of like what sounded like the Lost Frontier did. And it was going to neatly fill in a gap. And as somebody who is a fan of well-made prequels, or in-between quels, whatever you want to call those, I've always been a fan of that. For example, I highly recommend that anyone who's a fan of reading, especially if they're a fan of science fiction, picks up the entire collection of the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. It's an excellent series, and one of my favorite books in that series was actually the prequel story, which I don't recommend you read first, to be honest. I recommend that you read the books in the order they were written. I think you should read Foundation all the way to the end, then you go back and you read the prequel story, which is Prelude to Foundation. I don't think you should read, even though it's chronologically in order, Prelude to Foundation first. I think you should read the original and kind of go through it the way it was written. Because when you read the book as it was the books as they're written, in my opinion, the story unfolds beautifully. It really does feel like a grand epic that unfolds across multiple generations, all over multiple planets and different galaxies. It's really something fantastic to kind of read about. But then on top of that, when you're finally done reading the main story, to go back and to read the prelude, it's just so much more rich and so much more rewarding, because you get to see one of the best characters in the series finally fleshed out. And you've wanted to know about this character the whole time. You want to know about their motivations and why they're doing this. And it honestly does feel almost like a tribute to the character. Whereas if you were to read it first, you might miss some of that tributation, and it might reveal too much of what's to come in a weird way, because some of the plot points that are developed in that prelude are twists that are discovered in the series itself. And you can see that Isaac Asimov went back and kind of tied them in. It's almost like fan service and a way of a tribute to the original character that he created, and who would be Harry Seldon, for those of you wondering. And it's just a really good series. I mean, his other writing is really good too, but I think that the Foundation series is just leagues above his other works. I mean, he's got some great short stories. His robot series is a fun little mystery romp, if you will, but certainly is no Agatha Christie novel. Let's put it that way. But when you read his Foundation series, there really is something special to it. It's a type of story that can only be told through multiple perspectives. And I think that he did a fantastic job. And again, it's a different kind of story. This isn't a Hitchhiker's Guide, you know. It isn't something like that, and it isn't a Jurassic Park story. It's a very different kind of science fiction. It's a lot more old school. You can definitely feel that, and you can feel that this was one of those pioneers in that industry, because it feels original, and yet you can see that it's been copied when you read it so many times. But anyways, back to the game. And one of the things that I always liked about this Jak series was that originally, I mean, the first game was pretty basic. It's just like a platformer. You don't have too much going on there. But once you get to the second game, I feel like they really, I mean, it gets a lot of criticism because people say it ripped off whatever was popular at the time. Let's see if I can get up here. Come on. No. They say like that it ripped off a lot of the popular games at the time. You know, GTA, for example, with, well, I mean, we have one here, this little mini map HUD thing, which, to be fair, to say that at the time people are fair to say that it maybe ripped off GTA. But the number of games that have implemented one of these little mini-map HUDs exactly of this style with the markers and all that jazz since then, I mean, GTA pretty much introduced that to the common video game ecosystem. It's just like, it's become like a trope at this point, something you expect in a lot of games. So I definitely can't say that can be a fault in any way. If anything, it's a benefit. It was a good idea because so many games since then have done it in the decade and a half since, and well, I guess 2 decades really. And yeah, that can't be used against it. So that was never a problem, and I never even noticed that. That was a reason I liked Jak. Actually, was that it felt a little bit like GTA, and that's what I wanted in my game at that time. So you can't fault them for that. That's what people wanted at the time. It's what I wanted at the time. It's why I liked the game, and it was a nice change. It was, honestly, when you consider the original platformer felt like it had stepped out of the PlayStation era into the PlayStation 2 technology. But it was an original story, but you could see all the influences. You could see the Crash Bandicoot influence. You could see the Donkey Kong influence. You could see all the different kinds of influences that had come in from previous platformers. And on top of that, you could kind of get this sense of cartoony, colorful, bright worlds with boxes and breaking and all that kind of jazz, right? I think there were even flies. Were there not to collect in that game? So maybe not flies, but there was something that weren't just these eggs. There was something else, if I remember, that you could collect. And that was fine, and it was what was good for those games. Like, that was what people expected at that time. Again, it's what people expected these games to have. If you were on a PlayStation and you were originally playing those old PlayStation games like Gex and what are we? Why can't I think of any right now? My brain's just melting on me. There was lots of Crash Bandicoot. I can't think of any. Anyways, there was quite a few, but a lot of the games at that time followed certain formulas as well. Like, you were expected to have unique puzzles. Usually that would involve either a character's special ability or some sort of environmental theme. For example, there was a lot of frozen worlds back then. A lot of penguins in worlds, you know? It was just something that it was common. It was a thing that games did because partially the technology was limited. They needed to make do with what they could. But on top of that, it was a new industry. We didn't have all these massive budgets that we have today, funneling in, you know, millions and millions of dollars to hire, you know, asset designers just to make assets. You know, a lot of the time you had maybe one or two guys making assets, one or two guys coding levels, one or two guys doing the core gameplay engine, and then a couple designers maybe. These were small teams, you know, small teams dedicated, and everyone kind of pulling their weight and limited in their resources. So they had to come up with creative ways. On top of that, the industry hadn't yet developed a lot of the techniques that we take for granted today. And, you know, the pioneers would have to come forward and essentially cut their teeth on the raw experiences that they were to craft themselves. They couldn't lean on, you know, these industry quote-unquote standards, which, what a joke. You know, it's a creative industry. There's no industry standards. It's just things that people like, things that work well in certain situations, and ultimately that creativity can embody. And these days, it's so cookie cutter half the time that even if you have a good idea, like a HUD and a minimap, they're implemented so poorly because they're implemented as almost like checkboxes rather than core foundational components of the game. You know, oh, we gotta have a HUD minimap. Oh, we gotta have a tutorial. Why? Is the game actually that hard? Do you really need it? I mean, you know, back in the day, we added tutorials to these games, not because people necessarily needed their hand held. It was a lot of the time because it was a novel idea. It was a new gameplay concept. And frankly, it was something that hadn't been seen before. So there was a good chance that people would maybe be confused or they'd make a mistake and they wouldn't know what to do. But to go ahead and to tell people that they need their hand held to jump over a gap, to look around with a camera, to, like, come on. We don't need any of that stuff. I get it if you want to do some fancy calibration. If you're actually calibrating a system behind the scenes, okay, that's fair. You can do that and come up with fun little gameplay ways if you really need to keep the whole game somewhat immersive in some fashion. But I mean, honestly, why not just do the calibration at the menu screen before the game loads, before you've immersed the character at all, when they're still kind of out of it? You know, the menu isn't exactly immersive, so you can, you know, when they go click new game, that's when you can do a calibration screen and all that. It's not going to ruin anything for them. They don't need to have, you know, a character spend 20 minutes asking them to look at things around the world so that, you know, you can secretly calibrate it. Come on. Just respect the player's time a little bit more, and, you know, also give them the benefit of the doubt. They do understand that calibration, you know, makes sense. Like, most players understand that. And if not, they can, frankly, a lot of them can be educated too. You don't have to just yell at the screen and tell people that they're wrong and they'll never learn. They can be educated. People can actually learn things and, you know, not make that mistake again. But if we don't tell them and if we keep holding their hand, then we're essentially condoning their mistakes over and over and over again. And And that's not exactly the world I want to live in. And we see that all over the place. Everywhere you look, it's just crazy shit happening all over the place. Like, come on. It's ridiculous. It's like, it's just rackets at this point. It's rackets, but nobody wants to call it out because they're scared they're gonna get, I don't know, called, like, yelled back. Come on. Have some spine. So, like, if you're looking around and the whole world's going to shit, and the thing you're worried about most is calling out that the world's going to shit and people getting angry at you, then you deserve to live in a world that's going to shit, frankly. Because you're not gonna do anything to change. Why do you think the world is going to shit around you in a slow circling of the drain, turning to concrete, whatever you want to think about as your analogy? If that's the case, if that's happening, do you think that that world around you is decaying because... I guess there's a few reasons you could assume. You could assume that maybe it's decaying because it wants to decay, in which case you might think that you need to keep your mouth shut because everyone around you wants the world to turn to shit. And if you don't want it, they're gonna make you their enemy. That's mostly a fear, to be honest. That just seems mostly irrational because most people don't like the world going to shit around them, unless they can profit from it personally, in which case they're manipulative. They're usually the bad guys, and if they're manipulating people, they're probably not the majority of them. Let's be real here. Manipulators, frankly, can't really be a majority because once you have the manipulative group being a majority of the crowd, they're gonna be manipulating themselves half the time. They're going to start competing amongst themselves. That's the thing. I mean, all these systems eventually have to balance out. You can't just have pure vultures in the nest. They need people to prey on. So in other words, they're eventually going to need to... They're just going to eat themselves out of their own lunches, right? And they'll become so obvious, which is what we're seeing now. We're looking around. Look at the world. It's like... It's not hard to spot the vultures, to be honest. And everyone kind of feels that. I mean, there might be, I don't know, maybe 45% of the world right now is still maybe on the hook. And they're not quite really seeing things for what they are. But the majority, I think, are finally seeing it. I mean, I know for a fact, 1/3 of the people have definitely seen it. There's definitely 1/3 now are walking around, looking around going like, what the hell is going on in this world? What the hell happened to Haven City? How did the Baron get in power? Why is Baron Praxis running this shit? I remember when this city was good. Now we have metalheads all over the fucking place. He said he's gonna fight the metalheads, yet I keep seeing more metalheads. I wonder if he's fucking bringing in the metalheads. That's literally the world we're living in. We're living in Haven City, slowly being taken over by metalheads. All the while, the people that are causing all these problems, bringing in all these metalheads, are constantly claiming that they're going to fight the problem. But we all know, or at least 1/3 of us now, definitely know that all these problems are being caused by the same people that are claiming to then go and fix it. And about 1/3, or a little bit less than that, are on the fence, and they're not really sure if that's the case. They're not strong in any particular way. They're not really feeling, oh yeah, this is the way it has to be. This is what I'm gonna believe. I'm gonna go around, and they're looking for an answer. They need help to make that decision. Really, that's really what it is, right? Then you've got the jamokes, the blindfolded fools, and I mean, nothing's permanent. They can come around, so I mean, they're not lost by any means, but they're not exactly the people you want to be trusting. They're typically led by whatever the fashion is of the day. Hell, they might actually literally be wearing that latest fashion themselves in that moment. You know, these are people that are willing to go and change their hairstyles as soon as a new trend is released. I mean, you gotta realize that most people, hair is a pretty valuable thing for most people. The reason being is that, well, if you're like me, you know, you're balding and you're losing it. So it's like, you had it, now it's gone. And you kind of miss it. You kind of wish you still had it around. I mean, sure, there's some options to, you know, look into in our modern day, but I'm going to give it another couple decades, you know. It's like people were talking about laser surgery for forever and ever and ever, and there used to be all these horrible things you had to do to get laser surgery done, and then they just kept making it slightly better, and frankly, I haven't heard anyone talk about laser surgery for a long time. It's probably so routine now that you don't even like notice it. It's probably not a thing that you even want to brag that you got done because everyone's doing it. And I mean, I still haven't got it done, but it's at that point now where it's like, okay, I kind of get where we're at. You know, if I want to go and get laser surgery, I'm not going to worry so much. It's got decades of tried and true experience, and they've kind of ironed out a lot of the kinks. You know, it's like, that's my way of doing things. I don't go jumping in like crazy. I'm not a trend chaser. Because frankly, a lot of the trends are manipulative, right? They're like, why is something trending? Why is a particular thing popular? Why does anyone like it? I mean, it's not a lot of the time the reasons that people think. I mean, we like to imagine that it's because if you find something high quality, you kind of want to show it off, right? And you kind of want to get a little bit of street cred. Hey, I found this cool thing, and everyone's like, yo, man, blah, 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 found this thing. It's super cool. You got to check it out. And that's kind of how we like to imagine that all this really good viral quality content spreads. You know, we like to think it's like somebody doing a favor, either out of like, you know, the good of their heart, or because they want to maybe get a bit of street cred, or they like being the source of novelty and new information. And all of these things are true. They're all valid. You know, these are all definitely reasons that people go around and spread stuff. But there's also, I guess, less legitimate, less organic reasons. You know? And for the average Joe, we don't have any of this potential. We don't have the ability to do any of these things. We don't have newspapers under our control. We don't have television channels under our control. We don't have movie companies and production houses, PR and publishing firms, lawyers and lobby groups. We don't have any of this. We don't even have a fraction of this. Hell, if we're lucky, we're invested in some of this, and that's about it. You know, we maybe have a fraction of a percentage point in one of these companies, and we are proud to say that we get shareholder notifications and all that jazz. But we don't actually have any sway. You know, we might vote on some resolution. We didn't have any say in drafting the resolution. We don't know the people who did. You know, I know their names off the paper, but that's it, right? But there are people in this world that certainly have that power. Some of them we even know, you know, and we tend to talk about. For example, Jeff Bezos was the Washington Post, he has Amazon, Cisco, he's got a variety of different ventures and all sorts of different avenues. And so if Jeff Bezos wants to go around and promote a new Amazon product, it's really, really easy to make it sound like a lot of people like the product. Because can go and hire his PR firms that you've never heard of, but that are all subsidiaries and, you know, sister companies and all that jazz of other companies and stuff, or work with the industry powerhouses that all work with the same big leaders. So you got like Coca-Cola working the same big dogs all the time, you know, Apple's there next to Disney, next to Time Warner, next to, you know, Comcast, next to, you know, all these banks. They all use the same kind of firms. They're all getting audited by the same people. And frankly, if you're in those industries, if you were up in those high echelons on those big board of directors, then think about it. You want to spread something? What do? You reach across the boardroom. You say, "Hey, aren't you on the board of that company?" "Yeah." "Okay. Can you bring it up?" "Yeah, we'll get it up in the next meeting." Bring it up in the next meeting. And then they bring it up. And then it's all just like a whole bunch of in-kind deals and all that jazz behind the scenes. And then they'll just spread it. It's not organic. It's not because a lot of these people liked it. It's because they requested favors at very high levels, and those favors trickle down to people whose jobs actually depend on fulfilling the obligations of those people. So yeah, you know, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. That's why a lot of the trend chasers are nothing more than just useful idiots, in the sense that they're typically just a tool of these PR companies, because they don't realize that all the energy that they pour into these fads is really being directed by select corporations and a lot of interest groups. And sometimes it's beneficial. I'm not going to say that all these fads are bad. I mean, some fads come in, and if a fad's good, then yeah, if you like something about something, then partake in it. You know, send a message up to those same people pulling the strings and tell them that, yeah, they finally got something you liked. Maybe they can keep it around. But you also got to be careful, because you gotta know what your assumptions are, and you also gotta be, I guess, willing to flex on them if they're proven wrong. So, for example, I like to assume that, you know, maybe there's some good in the world, and that these people that are coming up with a lot of these corporate policies are doing so because they honestly want to make a positive impact in the world. Maybe that's actually the case. Maybe that's the case. But you know, a lot of the time what I find is that when you look at these policies, they're aligned in such a way that to extract a value over time. And the value is not necessarily linearly extracted over time. You know, a lot of the time there's a lead up period that is beneficial, where you as a consumer can actually benefit, and it's sometimes smart to get in quick. In cases where there's going to be a rug pull, for example, getting in quick to something can actually be beneficial, because you can extract the benefits from whatever the system is before it's gone. However, it can be very dangerous if there's any sort of lock-in at play, because if you find yourself getting locked into a system and then having the rug pulled up from underneath you, well, you're probably in it for a bit more than just your time now, because you're going to have to pull out, you're going to have to maybe do a migration, and in some cases it can be detrimental. If you've built your entire foundation, your entire business around certain assumptions, and those assumptions crumble, well, you can lose a business. We see that even on large scale cases, but a lot of companies like to pull things when it's no longer directly beneficial to them, or they've extracted their reason. And we see this a lot of the time in free services. You know, they'll put out a service for us to use, and the purpose of putting that service out there is a synergistic effect with one of their other products that maybe is a paid product. But in order to get you to use the paid product, you maybe need some sort of leverage, some benefit, some reason to do it. And so how do they do it? Well, they hook you in with the free product. And to maximize the use of the free product, the paid product comes along. And so you start getting people trickling in. Or maybe there's a benefit that if you're using this, suddenly the paid product feels like it's more useful. It feels like it's not as much of an ask. Whereas if this free product wasn't there, you wouldn't use it. Or other times, they'll split the free product off and just keep the core, like the most important features paid. And so the free product is there. You wouldn't really use it most of the time by itself, unless you're using the paid product. However, one feature might be useful, and so that's how they'll get people to use it for free. But then eventually they'll just move that one feature into the paid product, and if you want to continue to use the service, you'll have to start paying. And that's a technique that we see a lot of this time, and I'm sure it has a more technical name, but as far as I see, it's just a manipulative strategy where it's like a short-term distraction with a long-term trap. It's kind of like it's almost like how they led the buffalo through the buffalo jumps. They would get them running down through the prairies, and the thing is, you had to stay on either side of the buffalo because you had to keep leading them down into essentially the ravine and the drop where they're gonna fall off the cliff. But you had to get them to narrow in, because if you keep them on the plain, they're just gonna run away. They're gonna run off around the cliff. They're not gonna necessarily go where you want them to. And so you have to keep egging and egging and egging them on. And in this case, rather than doing it through fear manipulation, like they did with the buffalo, they lead you on with a carrot. They say, hey, come on in, get this free stuff, boom, 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 boom. And then sometimes it's even 10 years, sometimes it's, 20 years. And then they flip a switch one day and they say, okay, well, it's going to cost X amount of money to keep using this service. But by that point, you're so locked in. You've used this now for possibly a decade, 2 decades. You're not going to change because of this minor inconvenience of cost. Well, sometimes you will. But a lot of the time, you won't. Because you're so locked in that the convenience it's just it's almost the inconvenience of moving. It just vastly overplays the inconvenience of the cost, and they know that, and they banked on it, and now they're recouping their losses over time. You see this all the time, It's just it's kind of annoying. And even in video games, we see this, where they're doing these loot box things, where they try to recoup their costs now with these weird little loot box systems. And it's just cheap. Games back in the day like this, they used to reward players for playing over and over and over again. Spending a lot of time on a single title. And then once they'd beaten it, there would be Easter eggs, extra things they could unlock, all this stuff, replayability. And you didn't have to buy it. You had to just play, and it was a reward for those that liked the game. It was not a trick to keep you, rebuying the game. Unless I guess you were renting the game, then that could be one thing. But these days, everything comes with costs. Seems like they don't want to make a game that's just a standalone title anymore. And they don't, and even if they do make a game that's, got some standalone aspects, they're not going to release the whole thing. And I mean, so many people have complained about this, but it's got to the point now where the companies don't even care that they're being hated. They think they can just keep getting away with it. They think it's a trend in a weird way that's been accepted and normalized by society, and they're wrong. That's the thing. So many of these companies they're run by idiots that actually don't have business sense. They're con men at heart and in practice. So they're really good at getting people to give their money temporarily. They're really good at stealing money and tricking people. A lot of these board members are just, frankly, put in positions because of nepotism, and they're just there to be puppets, let alone, like, they don't really even know why they're there. You know, they just get a list of things they have to do, and they do them. It's a job for them. They actually don't even have, they're decision makers with no capacity to make a decision. It's like, just pathetic. But they're dumb too. That's the thing. I don't like to think they're really, really smart. And they have their strengths, obviously. I mean, they're manipulative. They're really good at manipulating people. That's, I guess, a strength of theirs. They're cunning, I guess you could say. Sly, if you will. I guess those are kind of positive traits if you say them in a certain way. You ignore the context. But, yeah, they have their strengths. What they don't have is foresight. They're not very bright when it comes to anticipating what's going to happen. Which is why our world keeps fucking collapsing around us. Because these idiots can't fucking see 2 feet in front of them. They're myopic as all hell. And they're just going to continue to be that way. There's, like, honestly, we got to purge them. That's the only way to get rid of this problem. You don't let people like this in power. It's a preventative thing. You know, you just literally, you don't let people like that in. You know, they don't belong there. They have no right to be there. They don't deserve it. They have no, like, you don't give them the privilege of it either. You know, it's as simple as that. These people should never have been allowed in the first place. The only way to fix this problem is to remove them. You gotta purge them out, get rid of them completely, never let them back in, never let it happen again. That's half the problem. That's how you prevent it from getting any worse. That is not how you fix the current issue. I mean, the current issue is, yeah, you do have to purge everybody, but that still doesn't fix the issue. It just makes it stop getting any worse. The existing issues are still present. The existing issues are going to be whatever they last touched, any projects they got in play, depending on how long their reach was. It could be even like a couple of years after a purge before they're finally rid of their horrible, horrible decisions because of the way that these systems kind of work. So even if you were to get rid of everybody tomorrow, I bet you wouldn't see the light of day until 2025, 2026, to be honest, before things would start to really clean up. Because you'd have to get new blood in. The new blood is not guaranteed to be good blood. You might have to get some dialysis in there and just keep cycling through until you find something decent for a while. But then once you do finally get some people in there, then they're gonna have to go to work, you know? It's just like if you get the white blood cells down to the cut and the wound or whatever, they start fighting the infection, but it still takes time to heal, you know? You gotta scab over and all that jazz. So I feel like we're a bit of a ways away before anything really gets solved and fixed. However, that being said, if it continues to get any worse, it's just, we're gonna see a purge pretty quick. Because it can't get much worse. Like, I'm really hoping for a voluntary purge here where companies just kind of take a step back, look at themselves, and without casting too much blame, get rid of the elephant in the room. Just plain and simple. Just get rid of the elephant in the room. And we all know what it is. A lot of people are saying it. It doesn't have to be said again in so many words, but effectively, I'm going to say it in a slightly different way. I'm going to try and say it in the way that I see it, which is as a very general problem. The problem, though, that I see is that we keep hiring people based on recommendation and not results. Recommendations are typically due to the fact that somebody, I mean, in some cases it is due to results, but a lot of the time it's because the person who's giving the recommendation was boosted by that other person. You know, they were maybe made better or made to look better in terms of projection because of that person, and so they feel that to give back, it's their turn to recommend this person for a position. And a lot of the time, if this is done truly out of like an honest, organic thing, it's a good move. But a lot of the time, it's not organic, right? And I've seen this firsthand in even small companies, 20, 30, 40 people, where you have an employee who's been working for, doesn't even, a lot of the time actually it's the newer employees that are the problems, but even if they've been working for a while, if they're one of those employees that have been working for a while, and then out of the blue they say, hey, I've got a recommendation for this person, it does not necessarily mean that the person is going to be as qualified as the person recommending. And I mean, sometimes they can be more qualified. A lot of the time they're less qualified. And the reason is that they're coming from a different perspective. A lot of the time, if somebody, especially if they've been working there for a long time, and then out of the blue they say, hey, I got this guy that I recommend. Usually the reason is that the guy that they're recommending is reaching out to their friend group and looking for help, looking for support, or looking for something. Because maybe they're in dire straits, or a lot of the time because they fucked up, frankly. They got fired from the last job, they got let go because they were kind of goofing off, or they screwed up or something. So now they're looking around and they're asking for help. They might not even have told the guy who's given the recommendation why they got fired or anything. Or they might have even lied. Just to save face. And in their mind, it's not... they're not even thinking about the person giving the recommendation's reputation being on the line either. They're just thinking like, I don't want them to, it's none of their business. They don't need to know all the detail. I don't want to burden them with it. I learned my lesson. That's what a lot of people feel like. They learned their lesson. They're not willing to admit it out loud, which means that there's still some learning to be done. And, I think that's for a lot of cases. But that's something, to me, that jumps out, is that if they're not willing to admit the issue out loud and they are lying like that, well, that's already a red flag. But the fact that they got fired in the first place, and it wasn't due to just, maybe the company going under or something, that could also be a red flag. But also, this person didn't recommend anyone for years, and then suddenly recommends this person. There should be a reason why. Why the change? What is it that prompted them? Is it that they've been trying to get people for forever to join, and that nobody's been available, and this guy finally decided he was gonna listen? That's a reason to do it. Honestly, that is a reason to consider the hire. But a lot of the time it's that blah 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 is looking for a new opportunity, and he reached out, and I know that we have an opportunity here, so I thought I would mention him in because I used to work with him, or I think he's a good guy, or I trust him, or something like that. Not very good. Just because I wouldn't even put him above a regular resume hire at that point. You screen them like any normal resume, and you bring them in, and honestly, the referral bonus thing is almost a detriment at that point. It does not lead to higher quality candidates in those situations. Only in the previous situation I mentioned can it really lead, where people are really headhunting, they're actively trying to get good quality people to jump aboard because they believe in the mission and the company, and they want someone that they want to work with for long term. That's a great example, but it rarely happens that way. And sometimes it does, but my experience is it doesn't. It tends to be that blah 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 has a reputation, or blah 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 has a connection, and blah 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 reached out, and that's why this person got hired. And when they do that, which a lot of companies, look at Netflix. Netflix is a great example. They hired a whole bunch of, just bad decision makers. And then they took a good thing, turned it into a bad thing, and now they're trying to recorrect it back into a good thing again, but they still in my opinion, have just a bunch of bad decision makers at the helm that are now maybe correcting for some of their bad decisions, but they're still at the helm, which means that they're just going to make more bad decisions because these decisions were avoidable from the get-go, and it was just through poor management that we're even in this situation. You may be wondering what I'm talking about with Netflix. I don't even think they have a product team. Like, they can't possibly have a product team anymore. Because if they do, then that product team has got to be like just non-existent. Like the product team is committing like employment fraud. Let's put it that way. They're not working. They're not doing anything. The product team must be like hiding out, or I wouldn't be surprised if it's just a bunch of like fake people getting fake pensions, and that money is like being embezzled somewhere. I don't think there's anyone working in that department. I bet you were to go like look in the offices that claim there's a product department, you would just find cobwebs and like stacked up desks. I don't think you'll find anybody working in that area. I'm serious, because when I look at that product, Netflix has languished. Like, they haven't made a change in that product in over a decade. I want to say 15 years, maybe? Like, think about that. At least a decade. Let's say 11 years. 11 years. That product hasn't had a facelift, an update. They've removed functionality. They haven't added anything useful. They've never added a single feature to combat any of the problems that they're constantly complaining about, despite the myriad of ways they could do so. It's just like, again, they don't have a product team. It's just like it's a fraudulent thing. They're like embezzling funds on their accounting sheet with product development. I'm pretty sure that's just fraud. Because the company doesn't, like, they might spend money on making movies. Like, there's certainly publishing going on over there. There is no product development happening under that company. And until they can get some sort of oversight on the board of directors and on their higher executive management to fix that problem, and to actually recognize that they're not just a production company now, and not just a propaganda arm, then that company will continue to make mistakes. I mean, yeah, once in a while they'll have a good product. They'll come up with a good show, they'll come up with a good movie, they might even get their hands on a series they can milk for a couple of years. But the overall experience will continue to decay and degrade, and it will be ever more dependent on that content. And as soon as they get bad content, the perception of their platform will be that it's bad. As soon as they get good content, the perception will be that it's fleetingly good, and then it will be mediocre, and then it'll be bad again. And that's just the nature of the beast when you're dependent on the content, because you don't build a proper product. I mean, it's incredible to me that cable television solved problems that Netflix has, like, before Netflix was even a company. And yet Netflix hasn't implemented any of the solutions to their problems to this day. So, again, I don't have high hopes when I look around and I see companies constantly doing this shit. You see it everywhere. Netflix, Apple, Samsung, Google, Microsoft, Activision, Ubisoft, Nintendo, PlayStation. Honestly, is there a company not Disney? Honestly, is there a company not fucking up right now? Seriously. In some small way, shape, or form, I think every single major company has got this disease right now. Myopic, short-sighted, profit-seeking over long-term, strong, foundational growth. These companies are fucking going up like bamboo when we need old growth forests. That's just the fact. And if these companies think that going up like bamboo is fucking a good thing, they're stupid. That's what I mean. They're actually myopic. They don't even get the analogy. They're that dumb. Because it's growth for growth's sake. It's, we're growing, we got bamboo shoots. No, guys. Old growth forest. What I mean by that is, I'm not talking like a fucking fire hazard here. I'm talking thick, grown, hardy, hardwood, old, dense forest that's thick and vibrant, lots of biodiversity, all that jazz. This thing is just like filled, like it's constantly growing every year. There's so much life there. It's so full, but it's not shooting up proportionally feet by every week, you know? It's not going up and up and up and up and up and up because it's filling out. You know, the thing about bamboo is there's space between all those things. They're everywhere. There's like, this way you can see through the bamboo forest and just like a bunch of sticks. You know, whereas an old growth forest you can't see through because it's full and filled out. And that's what I'm talking about. Real, full, heavy, thick, sustaining wealth. Not a bamboo forest that gets cut down and regrown every. That's what a lot of these companies have turned into. They're just bamboo forests, and unless they keep growing faster and faster and faster and faster, they appear to be shrinking because they're not building anything long term. They don't have any long term growth. They're just trend chasing. Look at Netflix. You would think that a system like that would be built around product, and yet it is completely backwards on that. Their long term strategy is to build up a catalog of their own content now. They've been doing that now for about probably 10 years now, and at first it was great. Like the first few years they were really banging out some quality content because you could see that they were focused on making good quality content. They needed to make a name for themselves, but once they had the name kind of going, you can see that they've just dropped the bar. You know, like it's a lot lower standards on a lot of their shows, and you can feel that a lot of it's formulaic in a way. Like there's a particular formula even in the way the production is shot. And now not every show's like that. Every once in a while they have a good show that comes through and it kind of resustains them. And those will be probably long term, unless they screw up somehow and they destroy the IP in some weird fashion or another, or butcher it through, you know, way too many reimaginings. That's a fair approach to content. But their product is languishing, just dying there in a hole. And the thing is, most of the content cannot be created by one person. It's the classic platform effect. A true platform, and that's what Netflix used to be, and I don't think they recognize that anymore. That's the other thing. Like, Apple was a platform. It's not really anymore. Like, think about it. Before 2016, between the year 2000 and let's say 8 to 2016, for 8 years, apps ruled the world for the most part. Everything was talking about being on an app. You gotta have an app, an app, an app, an app. It was like, but it was like a trope. It was like a joke. But everything was like, there's an app for that. But like every show was talking about it. There was an app for that. It was like almost like a meme. How many apps there were on the App Store at one point. And it was a competition at one point. Who has the most apps and stuff, and how many apps? There's an app for everything, and yada yada yada. You don't hear that anymore because it's kind of it's moved beyond that. You know, it was kind of like back in the day when there was really cool software in the 80s, and you would see commercials. You can still dig them up. There'd be commercials for like weird software platforms, right? You don't really see software commercials anymore. And even when I was a kid, there weren't really software commercials. There were for some, like some of the big players still had commercials, but it was the big dogs. And when you did see software, a lot of it was video games. Then that was kind of the start. You'd see these kind of commercials. Then games started becoming more like movies, and including in how they were produced, the budgets and everything. And I feel like that problem there was that it led to another set of boardrooms getting nepotistic. You know, they're a little too friendly. You got the movie execs now talking with the video game guys, and now suddenly everything's getting a little too same, you know what I mean? Everything is just too similar. And it wasn't the case before. There was a lot of original content back in the day in video gaming, and it was because it was coming from a different subset of people, different group of ideas and decision makers. It wasn't the same group. These people weren't looking to maximize their vertically integrated empires. They were looking to build a good fucking product. And that was the thing. Once you get to these companies, that when they're as big as they are, that's all that matters, is the vertically integrated massive conglomerates and empirical numerical studies. Really, it's like what numbers doing good, what's not. They don't care anymore about the underlying assets. They don't care anymore about the products. They don't care about the services they're providing. They only look at the numbers on the sheets, because to them there's so many of them, it doesn't mean anything. That's exactly why people hate companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and all that, because they're exactly that. They have their money in everything and they don't care about anything, you know. It's like when everything's a superhero, nothing's special, you know. That's the idea. But when you're a giant fucking conglomerate and you have your money in everything, nothing matters. And that's just the truth. That's why they're run by a bunch of fatalistic hedonists, really. These guys have nothing. Like they have to make up their own purpose with their own little trends and fads that nobody really likes, but they'll make people believe. Well, they'll make a subset of people believe. Again, they won't make the majority of people believe. The majority of people won't follow into these things. It's that they will control a majority of the narrative. And so you will think that that's the case if you're not paying attention. But of course, a lot of people are paying attention. But it's just not the majority of people, sadly. It's, like I said, probably 1/3 of people are paying attention. 1/3 are on the fence, and almost 1/2 are completely duped and deluded by their own, I guess, problem.
Looks like the bugs won.
What was that?
Nothing. All right. Everything with more than 2 legs start trembling, because the Daxtinator is in the building.
That's the spirit. Are you ready for your first test?
Just give me the bug juice, Pops, and make it a double. I'll hose down every creepy crawly that moves.
No. You must first learn the basics. In my day, we hunted bugs with style and class. A more elegant weapon. More
See,
civilized.
if this game was made today,
Now, for your first job,
it wouldn't be like
I
this.
want you to go and take out all
They'd
of
be
those bugs in the local hotel.
giving you a smartphone, telling you that you had to download some sort of weird app. They would hook you up to the internet. They would feed you a bunch of notifications. You'd be getting fed a few ads in the process of that. Then they would tell you how you had to download some DLC to turn the color of your fly swatter green, yellow, or purple. Because that's the way modern gaming would be. And you would probably have to connect online and verify your account and hook up an email and agree to get, you know, an IV drip of newsletters you have no interest in reading, just so that you can get that nice shiny green fly swatter that you wanted. Let's be real. That's what's happening in the world. Nobody wants this shit. It's literally, it's like they don't even know how to package it. They don't know how to make it even consumable. They can't make people actually want to eat this garbage, so they just literally force it on you with just numbers. And then there's people that just aren't paying enough attention to, you know, and they think, oh, I'll just get this one thing, and then they have buyer's remorse, you know, and you know they might like the skin, they'll use the skin, you know, they certainly didn't need the skin, and they'll probably think to themselves, man, I really didn't need this, wish I didn't. Oh, it just reminded me, this game had all these you could go to bed. I don't think you can do it now. Yeah, no, I probably have to like do some sort of mission first, but you could go and dream. I forgot. You could do all these little dreams as Daxter in this game and unlock all these things. They're like all these movies, like you could be like Neo from the Matrix and stuff. That was the other thing they used to do. They used to do cameos for movies. They didn't treat the games like movies. That was the other thing. Is it did feel like just different. And nowadays they just feel so similar. The politics are just bleeding into everything. Imagine if Daxter had some sort of woke ass politics. Like he was hitting on girls all the time. Like you wouldn't even have him be able to do that. You'd probably have him go into a bar, try and like hit on one of the girls, say something in his traditional way, and then she would probably open into some sort of monologue about how toxic masculinity is destroying even, you know, critters and all that jazz. You gotta get rid of it. You gotta stop it. We gotta purge out this ridiculousness.
The West Side Hotel. Find the concierge, and he will show you.
Concierge, got it. Okay, so that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Going to the hotel. And I gotta admit, like, again, I'm playing this obviously not directly on the PSP, but I swear to God, like when you open up the screen size on this, graphics look great. Considering this was on like a little handheld, man, just fantastic looking graphics. And I love the detail of this. Like you got boxes, you got little, like, look, he's got a photograph. You can't really see the picture there, but let me see. Can you zoom in? Oh, you can crawl. What else can I do? SWAT, jump. Oh, nice. I can double jump now. Okay. What else can you do? Yes, that's it for now. But look at all these details. Like this is a well-made little room, you know? And it's still done in a somewhat cartoony, caricature fashion. And that's one of the things I also really like about older games. And like, there's something to be said. Art can sometimes be improved with constraints. You know, I feel like sometimes the games of the past were better because they were simpler. Now, I'm not talking going back to Atari, because let's be real here. It's a bit much. Some of those games are a little much for me to even, although I mean everyone likes Centipede and Asteroids, but the adventure games are not quite the same, you know, they don't really hold up. But these days you just don't have any kind of caricature in this, you know, everything has to be either ultra realistic or so sandboxy that you're walking home with and like emptying your pockets out and there's grit and stuff on it. Like I'm talking like you might as well be at the beach. That's how much of a sandbox these games are turning into. Like they're forgetting the actual game component. And I think the most egregious example is the writing. It's just really going downhill. I mean, this game here, let's put it this way. This was a fun game. It was a pocket handheld game. You gotta remember the context of a game like this. The writing quality of a game like this isn't gonna be absolutely astounding because it's not a AAA budget title. But And the other thing is, back then, even then, I hate to say it, but they didn't have the budgets that they have now. But they would put more care into the way that they wrote the stories. It was just more apparent that things were more cohesive. They didn't mind having, you know, characters that were potentially you know, not necessarily
By all of these new nasty bugs. Collect as many of these
reflections of modern day
Daxter. Head inside and talk to the concierge. And remember,
propagandists. I don't know.
eliminate bugs.
Just interesting. Like a lot of there was still a lot of messaging. There was some subtle messaging in terms of, usually it was in terms of certain characters.
Get a load of this place.
You'd get a particular kind of character that would be usually oh, there we go. But you normally get a character that would be maybe stereotypical. Actually, this concierge might be a good example. I can't remember what this character is like, but I'm imagining one or two tropes. Stuck up, maybe. That was a common trope they like to do, where they'll have some haughty-toddy kind of person be like, oh, I need you to do this, and they'll just like, but be completely oblivious to what actually is involved, and not really care what's involved, just as long as you can get it done. It's kind of hands-off approach, or the demanding style. So now there's a third kind that comes up, and it's honestly my least favorite, so I'm really hoping this isn't the case, and that's the desperate for help kind, where they're like, but they're usually very thankful once it's done, which can be, it's usually nice after the fact. It's just kind of annoying. They're exacerbating.
You must be the exterminator. Mr. Crew, our best customer, will be pleased you're here.
Stuck up.
But I don't like the looks of you. The bugs up here ate the last exterminator alive. Anyway, I'd love to let you up the elevator, but I've lost the key somewhere. Have a look round for it, will you?
Yeah, so stuck up, hands off, snobby. Yep. But see, so that was typically how they would do their kind of messaging back in the day with games like this, is that they would have select characters, they'd give them a particular character trope, possibly a positive one or a negative one, and then usually there'd just be like some key scene or dialogue, and depending on how nasty or awful they were, there's usually a comeuppance, right? So maybe and a lot of the time it's humorous too. So they would be like humorously bad characters, but then they might have like a humorous bad thing happen to them as well, and then you kind of feel like, ha ha ha, this guy got what was coming to him, that kind of thing. But other times you would find that they a bit of that, I guess. They would do like a nice character, or they'd make like an annoying character and then change
Now bring me
them.
back a
And
nice stack of those gold bug gems, and I'll tell Osmo you've managed better than that last fellow he sent.
kind of like this guy right here. For example, you know, he was stuck up, but now that we've proven that we can at least get the key, he's like, ah, excellent, okay. Well, as long as you can keep doing this, and now he's trying to be like the classic, well, I'll do you a favor. Just like how most of the executives got their jobs. They probably had some concierge get it for them because they didn't have any skills to get the jobs themselves. They probably just had a concierge, you know, getting a hooker for Mr. Harvey Weinstein, and then, you know, they're like, oh, you want a job? Well, bring this hooker up to Mr. Weinstein and I'm sure he'll get you a job. I'm pretty sure that's how this stuff happens, you know? Also, let's be real here. Most of those actresses that complained about having sex with Harvey Weinstein knew exactly what they were doing when they did it in the first place. What do you think they did it? How do you think they were in his bedroom? How do you think that happened? You know, what, it just happened? No. Obviously they were there for a reason. I'm not saying I condone his actions. I'm just saying, you know, for you to, you know, I guess, just cast stones over that, but not cast stones at those women as well. That's the thing. I mean, I'm totally in, like, what those women should have done. If they were to be, you know, admirable in any way, if they were to actually deserve the credit that they're trying to claim all these years later, what they should have done is when offered, you know, I guess that deal, declined it, and then gone and maybe told somebody about it. Maybe told the world no, that they wanted to be famous, so they kept their mouth shut. And I'm not, again, it's a price they paid. I'm not saying it's a good price. I'm just saying that they paid the price for something. They chose to pay that price. They chose to make that choice. You know, and again, this is a very select situation. But that's...
I may have forgotten to feed the plants, I'm afraid.
Ugh. So that's how I look at it. Now, again, obviously exceptions and all that jazz, and I don't know all the first-hand experience, but that's my experience with these kinds of things, is that as I was growing up, I knew that they were sleeping around to get those positions. It was clear as day. It was, everyone knew. For them to suddenly come out of the blue and be like, oh, I didn't know, it was so awful. It was like, are you kidding me? Everyone knew. Everyone knew. That was the joke. I mean, you used to joke about it. You guys, your own industry joked about it. You made jokes about it in all your shows. You willingly knew you did it. I mean, let's be real here. It was like, you even made money off of it in meta form. Like, you didn't even, like, you didn't even have to... anyways. Enough of that. They're not worth my time. I mean, they're actors, so, I mean, what, are we gonna take them at face value because they're crying? Come on, really? Please. Most of them are probably pretty sketchy people, to be honest. Let's be real. You gotta be an interesting kind of person if you want to be really famous. I mean, hell, as I say that, you know, I don't really want to be famous. But if this were to take off and I were to get famous, I don't think I would keep doing it. I mean, maybe there'd be one or two reasons I could imagine myself continuing to do this, and that would be mostly related to, well, like what everyone does, might be useful some sort of benefit, right? But really, I don't think being in the limelight makes you very useful. I think only for a time, and then I think you have to get out of the limelight to kind of stay true to your message, if you will. If you're always in the limelight, how can you possibly ever take time to do the things that are meaningful? To take those moments out and to actually help the world. You can't. You know, you're too busy being, you know, on screen or something. Anyways. Flies. Look at this. Reflectable. Oh, no combat bugs. I forgot about that too. See, that was the other thing. They used to put in all these little mini games, but I like it when they make the games mostly optional. I think there might be one or two things you have to do in this that are not optional, but most of the mini games should, in my opinion, always be optional. And ideally hidden away, so as to not break immersion too much, or to be well thought out that, you know, they apply. But like combat bugs is a good example. And a little bit of there's some peer-to-peer action there, because that was the other thing. It was handheld, so there's a lot of that ad hoc and peer-to-peer, which I was also a big fan of. It was one of the nice things about having portable games, is that there was a big focus on I guess, co-op play, or not co-op, but multiplayer. That wasn't just limited to online server-driven lobbies. There's a lot more of like small local play on your local LAN, and I kind of like that. Especially if you're like out camping and you can bring your game and just, especially ad hoc, and you don't even need like Wi-Fi or anything, and you just play. That was kind of cool. And imagine, just take a moment here. Well, I guess he is small, so maybe this is not nearly as big as it looks, but imagine like this hotel just has this big garden hidden away in the middle of it. And look how it's built. What a weird design. Look at this. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's just a strange building for a hotel. You know what I mean? Like, imagine at a jump platforms. Like look at this. What is this? What is this here for? Obviously, these tunnels, like, this cannot be for normal people. So what is this for? Is this just like growing on the inside of the building for some purpose? Nice. I wonder what it is about humans and needing to collect things. You know, we see things and we want to get them. Why? I mean, in real life it makes sense, but why do we want to do it in a digital
Did I
world?
forget to give you the room
Is it just
keys?
because it's like that?
Well, you'll find a way.
Oh, that's not good. I gotta admit, you know, for an entry level, I forgot how big this was. It's not really an entry level, I guess, because there's probably only like 6 levels in this whole game, being that it is a small game. But I do like that they took the effort in each world to craft them in a way that feels good. You know, I just like the design. I like the art style, the level design. I mean, obviously it'd be nice if it was a bit bigger, maybe a few more things to do.
Oh, did I forget to give you the room keys? Well, you'll find a way.
What is this concierge, man? Like, literally, didn't he say like the last people got killed by the bugs? Like, what kind of concierge is this? He's got people dying in his hotel, and he's not even like concerned. This is what you call a 1-star. Again, see, this is the problem. Society is just falling. And this is a perfect example. Today's society, the amount of money that they charge things is just, I'm looking. There's like mites in the walls, you can hear it. Terrible. Probably not gonna let me complete because I left that mite bouncing in there and I can't find it. Oh well. Man, this is big. But also, you're sitting down, you got bugs like biting your ankles at the dinner table. Not exactly the place I want to stay. Look at this. Trying to sleep and then these things come jumping out of you, glowing. I mean, hell, even the plants are attacking you in this place. Dude. Not even a 1-star. This is a 0-star. Concierge doesn't even give you the room keys. Jeez. Useless. Look at this. There's more bugs than people in this place. I mean, I'm sure that's usually the case, but I mean, the bugs are almost as big as the people. There's rocks. Like, everything's just in decay. Disaster. reminds me of my city council right now, though. Yeah. Feels like going to complain about the cities. That's what happens. You just get like pushed at the door. That's pretty much the entire experience. Nothing else happens. Do you like they give you help? That is nice. Man, how many of these are there? Dude, seriously? What am I supposed to get this for? Oh my god. Look, I just got an award for this. This room is so infested. I'm getting awards for the number of bugs in this place. Dude, seriously, is this like an infinite, like, what's going on here? How many bugs are there, dude? I feel like this is one of those moments where you're just like, did I have to trigger something? Oh yeah, there's more. No. Dude. Holy crap. How many have there been in here? Oh my god. Never ending. I think this is like a glitch or something. 36? Did I enter the room at 20? 16 bugs in this room? Holy hell. Whoa, so that's like the bed too. Oh, that's freaky, man. Think about that. You're laying on this bed, and then like, oh, army of bugs into you. Oh, it just it's like my hair stand up just thinking about it. I think there's places in real life like that. You know, that's the real shame. You got like scum of the earth kind of people running in this world. Terrible.
Looks like the express exit for the Daxternator.
Oh, hold on. I remember this. There's something back here. There was something back here. Where is it? There was a... Okay, for a second I was 10 to 25. I'm like, ouch. I vaguely remember there being some sort of like secret... Oh no, it's after this. Yeah, it's at the bottom of this. There's something. I don't remember what exactly it is, but I remember there was some Easter egg. Because it was easy enough to miss. I think that's like a secret menu item or something. Let's see. Could be wrong, but I'm almost certain. It could just be another one of these eggs, for all I know. I remember all those years ago, there was something at the bottom of this. Let's see. Where is it? I think it's above this. There was something. Where is it? Maybe I'm wrong. I guess I'm wrong. False memories. I always like it when they add elevator music to elevators. So small touches, you know?
You've exceeded my expectations. Payment received in full, and I'll be phoning your employer immediately. Now off you go.
Ah. Amazing. He actually can do work. Who would have assumed? And, anyway, I think that's it for this,
Good work, Daxter. I hear you did a...
Yes, we did do a smash-up job. Smashed the place to bits. Left almost everything in ruins. Exactly how we found it. We should go into politics. Oh, that would be funny. You know, that's what they need. They need a game like that where you essentially are just a scumbag politician. And the whole point of the game is to essentially just rip people off. There's got to be a way to do it. There's definitely a way to make that into a game. Because yeah. I mean, we know who would win. All of our elected officials. Anyways. That's it. Thanks. Take care.